Tonight, millions of people around the world will raise a glass of beer, wine, or another alcoholic drink. Most assume this tradition began when humans learned to farm, brew, or ferment grapes. It seems like a story that starts with the first villages and the first civilizations. But modern science has revealed something astonishing. Our relationship with alcohol didn't begin thousands of years ago. It began millions of years before the first human civilization. Even before humans themselves existed. For centuries, historians believed alcohol was one of humanity's earliest inventions. As people settled into villages after the Ice Age, they began growing grains and fruits. Eventually, someone noticed that forgotten grain mixed with water, or overripe fruit left in a container, transformed into an intoxicating drink. It seemed like a simple and logical explanation. Then archaeology began telling a much older story. In southern Turkey stands one of the most remarkable archaeological sites ever discovered, Göbekli Tepe. Built more than 11,000 years ago, it predates Stonehenge by thousands of years and was constructed before pottery, metal tools, or even established cities existed. Massive T-shaped stone pillars weighing several tons were carved with animals, symbols, and mysterious figures, suggesting that this was a place of ritual and gathering rather than ordinary settlement. Among these incredible monuments, archaeologists uncovered enormous limestone basins capable of holding large quantities of liquid. Chemical analysis revealed traces of calcium oxalate, a substance commonly left behind during the brewing of grain-based beer. While researchers continue to debate exactly how these vessels were used, many believe they may have held fermented drinks prepared for large ceremonial feasts. If that interpretation is correct, alcohol may have played an important role in bringing large communities together long before organized civilization emerged. Thousands of kilometers away, another remarkable discovery pushed the history of alcohol even further. At the ancient settlement of Jiahu in central China, archaeologists uncovered pottery nearly 9,000 years old. Inside those vessels remained tiny chemical residues invisible to the naked eye. Molecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern analyzed them and identified one of the oldest known fermented beverages ever discovered, a mixture of rice, honey, wild grapes, and hawthorn fruit. This wasn't simply beer or wine. It was a carefully prepared recipe that showed early farming communities already understood fermentation and intentionally produced alcoholic drinks. For many years, discoveries like Göbekli Tepe and Jiahu seemed to explain everything. Humans settled down, cultivated crops, and eventually invented alcohol. But one question refused to disappear. If humans only began drinking around 10,000 years ago, why are our bodies already so remarkably good at processing alcohol? Most mammals cannot safely consume significant amounts of ethanol. Alcohol is toxic because it is produced naturally when yeast feeds on sugar. Many animals become severely impaired after consuming even small amounts. Their bodies struggle to break down ethanol before it affects the brain and other organs. Humans are different. Inside our digestive system is a specialized enzyme known as alcohol dehydrogenase 4, or ADH4. This enzyme begins breaking down ethanol almost immediately after it enters the body. It acts as one of our primary biological defenses against alcohol. Such a sophisticated adaptation raises an important question. Evolution does not create complex biological systems in only a few thousand years. If alcohol truly entered our lives with farming, there simply hasn't been enough evolutionary time for such an efficient system to develop. The answer emerged in 2014 through the work of geneticist Matthew Carrigan and his research team. Instead of studying archaeology, they studied DNA. The scientists compared the ADH4 gene across dozens of mammal species, including humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and other primates. Using a technique called ancestral sequence reconstruction, they were able to estimate how this gene changed over millions of years. The results were extraordinary. For tens of millions of years, our distant primate ancestors possessed an inefficient version of the enzyme. It could only process tiny amounts of alcohol. Then, around 10 million years ago, everything changed. A single mutation occurred. One tiny alteration in the genetic code replaced one amino acid with another. The change was incredibly small. But its effects were enormous. The new version of ADH4 became about 40 times more efficient at breaking down ethanol. Almost overnight, in evolutionary terms, our ancestors gained the ability to consume naturally fermented fruit without suffering severe poisoning. Why would such a mutation become so important? The answer lies in a dramatic environmental change. Around 10 million years ago, Earth's climate was becoming cooler and drier. During the late Miocene, dense African rainforests gradually shrank. Vast stretches of woodland and open grassland replaced the lush forests that had supported countless tree-dwelling animals. Food became harder to find. Fruit hanging high in the trees became increasingly scarce. Many primates struggled to survive. Some species disappeared altogether. Others adapted. Instead of remaining safely in the canopy, certain primates began spending more time on the forest floor. But the fruit lying on the ground wasn't fresh. After falling from the trees, fruit sat in the warm tropical climate where wild yeast naturally fermented its sugars into ethanol. To animals unable to process alcohol, these fruits could be dangerous. To our newly adapted ancestors, however, they represented an entirely new source of food. This idea forms the basis of what biologist Robert Dudley calls the drunken monkey hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, our ancestors did not evolve to enjoy alcohol for recreation. They evolved because naturally fermented fruit offered a survival advantage. Fermented fruit produced a distinctive smell that traveled farther through the forest than fresh fruit. Detecting the scent of ethanol helped hungry primates locate ripe food more efficiently. Fermentation also reduced harmful microbes that could spoil fallen fruit, making it somewhat safer to eat than fruit that had simply begun to rot. Most importantly, ethanol itself contains a significant amount of energy. During periods of food scarcity, every additional calorie mattered. Those individuals capable of digesting fermented fruit survived more often, reproduced more successfully, and passed this advantageous mutation to future generations. Over millions of years, that single genetic change became part of the DNA of every modern human. Yet evolution prepared us for a world very different from the one we live in today. For millions of years, naturally fermented fruit contained only tiny amounts of alcohol, usually less than 1%. Our ancestors encountered it only occasionally, and never in large quantities. Then civilization transformed everything. Agriculture allowed humans to grow enormous amounts of grain and fruit specifically for fermentation. Beer, wine, and other alcoholic beverages became reliable parts of daily life in many ancient societies. Centuries later, distillation made alcohol even more concentrated, producing drinks far stronger than anything found in nature. Our biology, however, never changed. The same evolutionary system that once helped starving primates survive now encounters an environment filled with abundant, highly concentrated alcohol unlike anything our ancestors ever experienced. So when did humans first drink alcohol? Not in the taverns of ancient Rome. Not in the breweries of Mesopotamia. Not even in the ritual gatherings at Göbekli Tepe. The story began much earlier, on the forest floor of ancient Africa, where a changing climate forced desperate primates to search for new ways to survive. A tiny genetic mutation allowed them to eat naturally fermented fruit, opening a new food source that may have helped shape the future of our species. The next time you raise a glass, remember that you're holding more than a drink. You're holding the latest chapter in a story that began 10 million years ago. A story written not only in history, but deep within your DNA.